Alex Anthopoulos threw us for a curveball and actually signed a bat first, getting Mike Yastrzemski. We're going to talk about it on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network. I am your host of Locked On Braves, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X, Locked On Braves on Instagram, and anywhere else. And on YouTube as well at Locked On Braves. Hit that subscribe button while you're there, the thumbs up button. Leave us a comment down below. Let me know what you think about this Mike Yastrzemski signing. And on the audio side, you can have out too. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Today's episode, we're talking about Mike Yastrzemski. The Atlanta Braves making a pretty big signing late on Wednesday night, locking up the outfielder for the Atlanta Braves for the next 2 years. We'll get into all of that, what it looks like for the rest of the team. And are they done now with the bats? We'll get into that discussion on today's episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, just visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So the Atlanta Braves, they actually do something that I wanted them to do. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying all of my takes are 100%. But if you do recall from a podcast a couple of weeks ago when I talked about 4 cheap options, and some of you maybe laugh at that because that's all the Braves do are cheap options. In that podcast, I told you how much I'd kind of fallen in love with the idea of signing Mike Yastrzemski and how he was becoming a really high target of mine. And here we are. The Atlanta Braves actually do sign him, listening to the podcast. And I know I'm not the only one that was talking about Mike Yastrzemski out there, but just the more that I looked into it while putting that podcast together, the more I just really fell in love with the idea of Mike Yastrzemski, which I'll get into all of that again on today's episode. But to give you the press release from the Atlanta Braves, we got a positive blue screen as they announced the Braves signed Mike Yastrzemski to a 2-year contract worth $23 million, set to make $9 million in 2026, $10 million in 2027, and then a club option for $7 million with a $4 million buyout for the 2028 season. And of course, Mike Yastrzemski so nicely agreed to donate 1% of his salary to the Atlanta Braves Foundation. This is a great move by the Braves. Maybe one of my favorite kind of low-key moves. You know, at the beginning of the offseason, I was really pushing for Cody Bellinger. Look, I would still love to have Cody Bellinger, but I think this is the cheaper option and maybe even the smarter option for the Atlanta Braves. Mike Yastrzemski has been a really consistent player for the San Francisco Giants and obviously got traded last year over to the Royals and was, just as good, if not better over there. But that's one of the reasons why I really started to fall in love with him. Now, he is 35 years old. This is not a young cat by any means, but he just continues to produce, and especially against right-handed pitching, and that's what you're going to face most of the time. But you look at Mike Yastrzemski and his career, which started at the big league level in 2019. He has had a 99 or better WRC plus, so he's been essentially league average or better every season that he's been in the big league. So you're talking about consistency. You're talking about 15 to 25 home runs every single season. It's just a 238 career batting average, which is not great. It's a career 24.4% strikeout rate, which isn't fantastic. In today's game, that's fine. But last year, that did go down a lot to 19.4%, by far the lowest of his career. The lowest before that was 24.4%, going all the way back to 2020. So I don't know if that was just, and his walk rate also went up a lot last year too. His walk rate was nearly 13% with the strikeout rate down to 19%. So if that is a strategy, that were to continue, then I'm even more excited about this move for Mike Yastrzemski. And remember that he was playing in a ballpark in San Francisco that's not necessarily the most hitter-friendly ballpark, which was another point that I made on that podcast a couple of weeks ago, where his ISO was in the low 120s in the first half with San Francisco last year, and he went to Kansas City after the trade deadline, and his ISO just absolutely exploded into the 200s. Now, it is a career 210 ISO, which is well above average. So you're talking about a guy that brings a good bit of power, and I think he can do great things, obviously, with his home ballpark now and Truist with that porch out in right field. I think he can, be a really good bat in this Braves lineup. And that's what I've been wanting. And that's what I've been pushing for. All the talk in the winter meetings was that Alex Anthopoulos is really focusing on pitching. And we're hearing all these rumors about, the Braves being in on a lot of the pitching. And it had me worried that he wasn't all that concerned with the bats, which, look, relief pitching is still my number one priority. It's what I said on the last podcast, but I put bats up above starting pitching. I need some more depth of hitters in this lineup and some diversity to be able to mix things up in the lineup. And I think Mike Yastrzemski does this with the track record that he has. Like I said, it was a late bloomer. He didn't make his debut until his age 28 season, but since entering the league, he has been highly, highly productive and consistent as an offensive player, and not just offense either. He's really good defensively in a corner outfield spot, and he can cover center field for you. Now, I would not recommend it too often, but if you needed to, you could run him out there in center field at times. Now, he and Michael Harris both being lefties, I don't, it doesn't make sense necessarily to sit Michael against a tough lefty and put Yastrzemski out there, because you really don't want Yaz facing left-handed pitches. This is a strictly platoon bat that you want facing right-handed pitching. But, if Michael were to get hurt or something like that, you could put him out there for maybe a short period of time. I don't think you would want him to be doing it over a longer period of time. You look just at last year, though, in his splits, it's a 256 batting average against right-handed pitching last year and just a 138 batting average against lefties. So again, this is strictly a platoon player, which is why the deal is what it is. Despite his consistency as an offensive player, you really are only batting him against righties, which is, again, what you're facing the majority of the time. You look at the career numbers for Mike Yastrzemski against left-handed or against right-handed pitching. It's a career 120 WRC plus with just a career 79 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Or against left-handed pitching. Sorry. So very, very much a guy that you're going to only play against righties, where he's been really, really good in his career. An 809 OPS against righties, career 246 batting average, 11.3% walk rate, 23.8% strikeout rate, an 227 ISO against right-handed pitching. I mentioned the 120 WRC plus, and that's what you want. You want to be able to have guys like that you can mix and match in your lineup. So I really like the signing from the Atlanta Braves. Again, as I talked about a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, it was a guy that I was really targeting as that. Yes, it is somewhat of a cheaper type of move, which we know the Atlanta Braves want to go after it. It's not the big flash. It's not the signing or trading for Byron Buxton. It's not the signing of Kyle Tucker, but it is a bat that I think helps this lineup out tremendously. Like, the offensive output is not going to necessarily be dependent on Mike Yastrzemski in 2026, but he is definitely going to help them reach those numbers that we want to get to. And I've said this for the past several years, nothing really matters all that much if the core guys don't get it done. If Riley, Olsen, Acuna, those guys don't step up and get it done, but you can help raise your floor by having guys like Mike Yastrzemski batting 6th, 7th, 8th in your lineup, as opposed to some of the other guys they've had batting at the bottom of the order in recent years. So I'm all on board for this signing. I absolutely love it. I do not agree with Delmar here in the comment section. I think this is a great signing. Again, if you're not going to go out and spend that big money on the bat or trade for the big bat, which they weren't likely to do, I think this is an awesome move for the Atlanta Braves to help raise the floor of their offense, give them some more depth, give them somebody that they know can crush right-handed pitching, somebody that can play all three outfield spots. It couldn't get much better than what I was hoping for with the Atlanta Braves with this move. Next, we'll talk about the fallout from this move. Are they now done? How do you adjust the lineup now with Mike Yastrzemski? We'll get into all that here next. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. And maybe you're like me. You can't wait for baseball season to get here. You can't wait to see Mike Yastrzemski in the home opener for the Atlanta Braves. Be checking that Game Time app to get the best deals on that home opening weekend and throughout the regular season. But maybe you're out of sports for the moment. You want to go to a concert? They got that as well. You can see those prices right there in the Game Time app. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets or event, match, concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Again, download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Thank you as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Make sure you go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. And thanks for making Locked On Braves part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Or I guess we did that, but thanks for making Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. And if you're truly a diehard Braves fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me and Lindsay, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to lockedonbraves.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes below. Getting back into our discussion here for Mike Yastrzemski in the move the Atlanta Braves made here on Wednesday night. Again, my overall just thoughts on the signing. I love it. I think it's a bat that I really liked and I talked about a few weeks ago as somebody that I was starting to kind of fall in love with as a signing. I think the deal makes a lot of sense. It's not a high AAV. It's not a long-term deal. And it's a bat that's been highly consistent and very good for a long time now. I know he's getting up there in age, but still been able to produce and maybe even you get him out of San Francisco full time. Maybe you see even more power from a guy that's already shown you a lot of power in his career against right-handed pitching. So I think this is an A+ move, but I still think there's more to be done. And I think even more to be done still in the lineup side of things. There's the question, I think it was Mark Bowman who had asked this, was this mean that Dubon's the everyday shortstop? Why would that mean that? Why would signing Mike Yastrzemski mean that Dubon has to be the everyday shortstop now? I don't understand that at all. And I still believe the Braves need to be in on shortstops. Even if it is Ha-Sung Kim, assuming the price isn't outrageous, I would still be all on board on getting Ha-Sung Kim and putting Dubon on the bench where he probably needs to be and have him in that super utility role. And then you're talking about having really great depth on your bench. You know, on any given day, you're going to have Murphy, Yastrzemski, and Dubon and Eli White on your bench. I don't see any problem with that. So I don't think this move at all indicates that they're done looking for bats. I think now it is kind of narrowed down to it has to be shortstop, but I don't think this puts it out of the realm of possibility that they're still going to get a shortstop this offseason. And I think Mark Bowman did follow up with that. He said this move doesn't change the Braves' pursuit of a shortstop. They could benefit from the versatility that both Dubon and Yaz would bring to the roster. So yeah, this still isn't the end for me. Like, this is a really good signing. I'm happy with this signing, but I still want them to go out and get a shortstop, even if it is Kim, who I'm not in love with, but I do think it helps just create more depth on your bench and a guy in Dubon. What it also does too, because Dubon is a guy that hits lefties better than he does righties, and Yastrzemski obviously hits righties better than he does lefties. It gives you the ability to kind of mix and match those two guys. And this is what I've been asking for. What this does mean, I'll tell you what I think this does mean. We're not going to have Marcell Ozuna back. You're not going to have a locked-in DH at this point. I don't think you sign Mike Yastrzemski unless you plan to move Profar, which I don't think is the plan, and I don't necessarily agree with that either. But I believe this signing means that we're not going to have a stagnant DH, that you're going to have a rotation through the DH spot of Murphy, of, yes, probably Yastrzemski, maybe even more so Profar, because Yastrzemski is the better defensive player, but you're going to have a rotation of guys going through the DH spot, which is what I've been asking for. You know, it allows you to give Ronald a day in the DH spot, even Matt Olson and Riley, Riley having his injury, troubles the last couple of years, some of those not necessarily his fault, getting hit in the hand and all that, but it's just what we've been wanting for, or at least what I've been wanting, to have a more fluid DH spot. So I do think that this means Ozuna's not coming back unless he wants to come back in some sort of bench role. Even I just can't see it. Because there's only one spot that you can put Marcell Ozuna and it's at the DH. So this to me ends the full-time DH idea for the Atlanta Braves, and that we're going to see a rotation in that spot, which I'm all on board for. But I don't think this means that they're done just completely looking to upgrade specifically shortstop. And I hope that's still on the list, and I hope that happens, whatever that might look like. But the question does become, how do you divvy up the at-bats now with Mike Yastrzemski? And for me, it's pretty simple. One, we don't know what Sean Murphy is going to look like to begin the season, and whether or not he's even going to be ready to begin the season. Certainly hope that he is, but I think it's very obvious that when you're facing a right-handed pitcher, Yastrzemski is probably going to be in the left field or at DH, and Profar's either going to be at DH or on the bench, and you're going to put Murphy in that spot. I don't worry about this, and this has been my main point throughout the entire season, because everybody's been asking, where are you going to put this other bat that you go get him? I don't worry about that. I let it play itself out. But I do think when you're facing a righty, Yastrzemski is going to be in the lineup somewhere, either left field or DH. And at that point, who's catching? If Baldwin's not catching, then he's probably in the DH spot. But you mix and match it, and there's ways to get everybody the at-bats that they need. I think Murphy's a big one in this, because if he's not completely healthy to begin the year, then obviously it's kind of a moot conversation right now, because you're going to have plenty of bats for these guys. And then the question becomes, once Murphy does return and is healthy, if he is crushing the baseball, then it becomes a good problem to have. So it's not really a worrisome thing for me on how you're going to get these guys at bats. These things always work themselves out. For me, it's been more about just get the bats and get the quality of depth. With the injuries that you've sustained the last 2 years, just get the talent and get the bats, and everything else will work itself out. And now you're looking at, having a guy like Yastrzemski, and like I said, either Murphy or Baldwin or Profar that you can put in that DH spot. You go and get even a Ha-Sung Kim for shortstop, and it makes your bench even that much deeper with a guy like Dubon on there. So again, I'm not worried too much about how they're going to mix and match things. There's ways that you can do it. I think it makes a lot of sense that you put Yastrzemski in the outfield most days when he's going to play against righties, just because he's a better defender in a corner outfield spot over Profar, and you can DH Profar some, which is what I think is probably going to be the most likely lineup when you face a right-handed pitcher. You're probably going to have, Baldwin behind the plate, Yastrzemski in left field, Profar at DH, or Murphy even at DH over Profar. And I think, in the splits for Drake Baldwin, I know he didn't start a lot against lefties last year, but there really was no data to back that up. And so Baldwin doesn't need to be a complete just shutdown against lefties. But again, we'll see with this new managerial team what they're going to do. But you certainly could play it out that way. But again, these guys are going to get their at-bats. That's not a big concern for me as far as how they're going to handle it, and that stuff will all work itself out. I just think you go get the talent like they've done, and I'm really excited about what they can now do with this lineup and how they can actually mix and match and use their bench. The bench has been pointless for the Atlanta Braves for so many years, and now you're able to use that a little bit. All right, next I want to get into some of your comments. We'll also get into what happened in the final day of the winter meetings. We'll talk about all that here next. NFL Sundays moved fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's why making live betting with FanDuel is so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. You can look at the World Series odds out here for 2026. The Braves moved back up. Maybe they were in on that Mike Yastrzemski signing. They were at 1900 plus 1900 to win the World Series. They fell back down to plus 2000 where they were to begin the offseason, and now they're up to plus 1900 with the Mets taking a little bit of a stumble. They haven't had the best winter meetings or the best offseason so far. You can see all those odds over at FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Well, thank you again for making Locked On Braves your listen today. Thanks so much for staying up late with me here. I was about to get ready to go in bed and go to church on Wednesday nights. We had gotten home. We got the kids in bed, and I jinxed myself. I told my wife, she asked, do you have to record tonight? And I said, well, not unless there's some breaking news. I go to check my phone, and what do you see? Some breaking news. So jumped on the pod real quick to do this one live. So thanks for sticking out here, or sticking through this one with me, kind of throwing it together last minute. So I really do appreciate all of you jumping in here. We got over 250 people in here live. So thank you so much for that. But let me know your thoughts on the Yastrzemski signing. Be looking at some of the comment section here in a minute. But to kind of recap what happened on the final day of the winter meetings, not much for the Braves. They didn't take anybody in the Rule 5 draft. They didn't have anybody taken. Blake Burkhalter, David McCabe, both staying in the system. So that's great because I think Burkhalter can give you some depth for the rotation and the bullpen this season. So I'm really glad that Burkhalter got to stay around, not just that he's an Auburn Tiger and a great human being, but he also gets to stay around for him, or for the Braves rather. And so that was great news as well. They took a couple people in the minor league portion of the draft. Nothing really significant to talk about there. The big news of the day from the winter meetings is that the Baltimore Orioles signed Pete Alonso to a massive deal, and good for them. And I had tweeted out earlier today, and maybe AA saw this and took offense, that it was nice to see a team who had a disappointing year like the Orioles did come out in the offseason, be aggressive, be bold, take some risk like the Orioles have done. They were in on Kyle Schwarber. They didn't get that, so they pivoted and went and got Pete Alonso. They already made the trade for Taylor Ward. They're probably going to be in on some of these pitching, some of the starting pitching as well. Maybe Framber Valdez, I know they've been mentioned to as well. So I really like to see that from the Orioles. And then the Braves go out and do something, not quite as big, not quite as flashy in getting Mike Yastrzemski, but they do go out and make a pretty significant move to help upgrade the team. And I do think it's an upgrade to the team. But as I said earlier, this can't be all the offseason, but it is another good part of the offseason. Again, re-signing Iggy, I think, was good. Trading for Dubon, I think, was good to give yourself insurance at shortstop. And if not, get yourself a really good utility guy. And I think signing Mike Yastrzemski is a really solid move as well. But as I said earlier, I still think they need to sign a shortstop, even if it is just Ha-Seong Kim. I think they need to find a setup guy, which that was one of the more surprising notes from the winter meetings, that the Braves at least asked on Edwin Diaz. I don't know how far those talks got, and that they've been in on Robert Suarez, who's still out there. I mean, you go and get Robert Suarez, now we're starting to talk about an A++ offseason. Like just that one deal there with what they've already done. I think you'd still need to get the shortstop maybe shored up, maybe to get that second plus in the A++ part. But I think you go out and get somebody like Robert Suarez to pair with Iggy in the back of the bullpen, two guys with closer experience like that, on top of signing Yastrzemski to help out the offense. I think that's the makings of a really good offseason right there. I mentioned the other day, starting pitching is not as big of a need for me as maybe it was coming into the offseason. Still would love for them to go out and find another starting pitcher for at least some depth, but it's definitely down the priority list for me, with relief pitcher being at the top, bat being the second one. And I think this takes care of that. Like this is, it's not the big bat necessarily. I came into the offseason very optimistic, thinking that they might go get a Cody Bellinger or trade for a Buxton or do something massive. It's not that, but it makes the team better and it makes the offense better. And this is a really good signing for Mike Yastrzemski. So I'll take that. But again, there's still more work to be done this offseason. But the Mets had a really, really, really rough winter meetings. Like it wasn't great for the Braves until this signing here, if you want to throw that into the winter meetings part. It was actually officially over at that point. But rough winter meetings for the Mets. They see Edwin Diaz shun them to go to the Dodgers. They lose Pete Alonso, who they apparently weren't even really all that interested in bringing back. And both of these guys, they mentioned that they didn't want to go long in years. So are the Mets kind of changing their MO a little bit? Are they trying to be a little bit more risk adverse and not signing players to big deals like that? Steve Cohen maybe not seeing the benefits of all his spending here the past couple of years. Is he maybe dialing it down a little bit? That's something very interesting to monitor. I'm sure they're going to make some big moves here throughout the rest of the offseason. And they also did not, get that top draft pick. They had a chance to get a top 6, very small chance. They didn't get that. And so they go all the way back to 27th in the draft. So not a great week for Mets fans. And this certainly was a good night for the Atlanta Braves. Just checking Twitter real quickly, make sure there's nothing else that I was missed while I was with family time over the past several hours. A lot of trade rumors out there, but didn't see any of those big trades happen. We'll see if those, maybe materialize over the next couple of weeks. Getting to some of your comments and questions here for those that are here live. AJ Evans says, still waiting for the main course. This might, unless they get Robert Suarez, which is going to be another 35-plus-year-old or another old guy, so it's not going to be a long-term deal. This might be the main course for us, to be quite honest. And I can understand that being underwhelming for Braves fans. I certainly would get that, AJ, but this might be the biggest move that the Braves make this offseason. We'll have to see. Unless it's a big trade somewhere, free agent-wise, this could be the biggest move that they make. Daniel Brown says, I like the signing. We still go after Buxton or Seager. That's another interesting one, too. Evan Grant, who's a really good reporter for the Rangers, said the Braves have checked in on Corey Seager. Look, it's hard for me to imagine it happening. But one thing it does say about the Atlanta Braves, and I've seen other people make this good point, they already know what the price is monetarily for Corey Seager. The Braves already know the absurd amount of money that he is owed. And so the fact that they would even ask about Corey Seager tells me they got money to spend. Whether it gets done or not, we'll see. As I said the other day, the guy from ESPN who said Sean Murphy and J.R. Ritchie for Corey Seager, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Like, if that's all it took, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Especially if you have the money and you're not worried about the money. That deal needs to be done. You're talking about a top 5 hitter in the game. When healthy, I get it. Similar conversation we've had with Byron Buxton, but he is that good. And so hopefully they're still in on Seager. That would be your main course there, AJ, if they were able to pull that out. I think Buxton's completely out of the picture now. And unless they're going to, then at that point you would have to move, probably Profar or somebody, like that. One of the outfielders not named Acuna. You'd have to move somebody at that point. So I think Buxton's out, but Seager, if the Braves are really interested and they got the money, it could be a possibility. Josh Donaldson 8 says, do you think we are waiting on pitching? What do you think? It sounds like they're in on pitching, at least relief pitching. The fact they checked it on Edwin Diaz, knowing how much he was going to cost. They checked it on Robert Suarez. It tells me that AA is still very highly interested in getting another setup guy, which is encouraging. Maybe they miss out on some of the top guys, but it is very encouraging to hear that AA is still interested in signing, one of the top relievers. And talking about top relievers, BC in here as well. Dodgers fan got Edwin Diaz. Drew Harmon says, how do you guys not understand this move? Yeah, I don't know. I can understand people wanting and hoping for something bigger to happen. And this isn't that big move, but it does make a lot of sense with getting somebody that is a strong side platoon player that you can, put in the outfield and or DH and can help you get other guys in the DH spot and leave you room to get other guys in the DH spot as well. I mean, it makes a ton of sense to me. I think the only reason it wouldn't make sense to some people if they were hoping for a bigger bat than that. Doc's card says Snipe Kubel, Skubal. You wrote Kubel, but I think you meant Skubal. Snipe Skubal from the Dodgers. Yeah, there was one rumor going out there, and I'm sure BC would love this, about the Dodgers trading for Tarek Skubal, but trying to work out an an extension in the process of that. If Skubal goes to the Dodgers, that would not be very fair. Maybe the Braves can snipe him. One Wolverine says, unless the Braves trade Harris for Buxton. We talked about that. It doesn't make that much sense to me for especially if you're considering like a 1-for-1 Harris for Buxton. That's very risky in center field. I would rather keep Michael Harris and get Byron Buxton. Mass Boost says a 3-way trade between the Braves, Texas, and Baltimore might make sense now that Samuel Basallo is blocked in Baltimore with the Alonso signing. Can they put him at DH and put Pete Alonso at first base and Rushman at catcher? So I don't know if that makes more sense, but I think if you were working with the Rangers for a Corey Seager deal and they needed a catcher, which I think they do, putting John Murphy in that deal I think makes a lot of sense. Andrew Chandler says, you keeping Dubon at shortstop, Jake? Not if I can help it. Again, I still think they need to go out and get a shortstop. I still think they need to go out and upgrade the shortstop position, even if that is Ha-Seong Kim, which is not the biggest offensive upgrade, but it gives you more depth at the position, assuming price. Obviously, I'm not going at this point. I'm really not going much beyond $14 million a year for Ha-Seong Kim, and even that feels like it's kind of pushing for me at this point. A lot's going to depend on what his market is, and it sounds like it's maybe not shaping up to be as high as we thought it would, being the really only shortstop on the market. If you don't think that Bo Bichette is going to stick at shortstop, so yeah, Dubon's not the shortstop for me if I can help it. I'm still searching for that everyday shortstop if I'm the Atlanta Braves. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for staying up, joining me so late. Appreciate all the comments, all those here. Sir Marshall, Andrew Chandler, Doc, Mass, John Goldfarb in here as well. One Wolverine, Little E. Haven't seen you in a little bit. Thanks so much for being here. Says AA needs to keep the Rangers on the phone till he can pry Seager away. I'm kind of on board with that at this point. Now that's what I'm getting most excited about. Hey, I got excited about Mike Yastrzemski and he signed him. Maybe if I get a little bit more on board with Corey Seager, that'll happen as well. But thank you all so much for joining me here today. Again, you want to be part of our Everydayer Club. You can check that out at lockedonbraves.supercast.com. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't already. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave us a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.